We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of Cash Flow Pro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I'm here today with Jay Scott of Bar Down Investments. Jay, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Casey. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. We're always glad to have our good friends that live and reside in the gloomy, cloudy state of Florida with us, so that most of us can be jealous of probably what you're looking at. But I noticed, I think you're in Sarasota, right?
I am.
And is that where you're originally from?
No, we've been here for about 3 years. We've lived all over the country, but about 3 years ago, we were outside of D.C., and my wife got cold and said, we're moving someplace warm. And I said, okay. And a month later, we were here in Florida.
Man, there you go. And that's that. If that doesn't like scream, hey, passive income, do what you want to do, live the life you want to live, I really don't know what does. So, Jay, why don't you kind of start out, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, how you got into the business, and then we'll kind of take it from there and let the listeners get a glimpse into what you all do and how you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a former tech guy, engineer by education, spent most of my career in Silicon Valley. Actually spent most of my career at Microsoft doing the engineering and business stuff. 2008, my wife and I decided we wanted to get married, and we wanted a little bit more flexibility. We were both working ridiculous number of hours, and like you said, we wanted that freedom to kind of do what we wanted and raise a family. And so 2008, we quit our jobs. We moved back to the East Coast, fell into to real estate. Between 2008 and 2018, flipped about 450 houses, wrote a couple books on the topic, and 2018.
That's like one a week.
we were doing about 40 a year. 2018 came around and was a little bit burned out on flipping houses. Also started to feel like the economy was changing a little bit. I thought we were heading towards a recession in 2019 or 2020, which we did for about 2 weeks. And so I started thinking about what asset class I'd like to be in should the economy change, and really liked multifamily for a whole bunch of reasons. So 2008, made the transition into larger multifamily, started syndicating deals. We now own about 1,000 units, mostly in the Southeast and Texas. And I'm a partner at a company called Bar Down Investments.
Awesome, man. Now, Bar Down Investments, do you own, are you a partner owner, or are you just, obviously if you're a partner, you're an owner, but I mean, how many of you all is there?
So there are two of us as the key principals. My partner, Ashley Wilson, and I, we're 50-50 owners. And then we have a couple other partners who are more board of director type partners, and they participate in the deals. But the company is run by Ashley and myself.
Awesome, man. That's great. So it seems like you definitely have the experience and the at least the knowledge, and you're not too far separated from that, and being it's like 4 or 5 years ago. So there's a lot of beginning syndicators out there, or people that are looking to become beginning syndicators that, of course, if you're a key principal or a key partner or key whatever, there's interchangeable terms there. But I guess what I'd like to hear about a little bit is your actual first syndication deal, like where you went out and you found maybe a 100-unit apartment complex, and you were like, because it's obvious that you didn't just start out where you are today. I mean, you had to learn, you had to gather investors, you had to figure all of that stuff out. So I'd like to hear a little bit about your first deal, where we talk about the capital raised, how you got the loan, so on, so on, so
Sure.
on.
Yeah. So first, I'm a big fan of not necessarily going it alone. And so when I wanted to start in multifamily, I realized that despite the fact that I had an engineering background, I had flipped several hundred houses, I knew the equity and the debt side of things. I knew there was a whole lot that I didn't know, and I knew, especially if I was going to start raising money from other people and be kind of a fiduciary for other people, that I really wanted to understand the business well. So I mentioned that my partner now is a woman named Ashley Wilson. She's somebody I've known since I guess around 2015, and she's been doing multifamily for a lot longer than I have. When I was ready to get into multifamily, first thing I did was I kind of went through my Rolodex and said, who do I know that I trust that I could kind of learn from in this business? And so Ashley was the first name that came to mind. I basically went to her and I said, look, here's a deal I propose. Um, I'll come work for you for a year. You have access to my knowledge, you have access to my skills, you have access to my time, you have access to my money, and you have access to my network. And I'll give you that for a year. And in return, all I ask is you mentor me and you teach me the business.
Sure.
I think we both agreed it was a great idea. It was win-win for both of us. So she said yes. And so basically I spent the next year kind of working for her company. And so did everything from,
Now,
yeah,
like physically working, or like I'm talking about, like get up and go to the office every day working, or virtually, where like what was your geographic? Because I know that's a challenge for a lot of people right
yep,
now. Because the thing is like I could pick up the phone and probably call 100 people and propose the same thing that you just proposed. Likely would get some takers,
yep.
but the fact of the matter is how did that mentorship look?
Yeah.
Go ahead with that.
Yeah. So at the time, I lived outside of DC. She lived in Philadelphia, and so we were not like co-located. Um, Even to this day, we have staff, we have employees all over the country, and so very few of us live like anywhere near each other. My closest employee is about an hour and a half away, and hers is probably several hours away. So even at the very beginning, it wasn't going into an office and being in the same spot every day. But
Sure.
she and I are both very big on systems and processes and basically treating a business like a business. And so from day one, everything was very structured. We had regular meetings and we had meetings between the partners and then we had meetings between the rest of the team. And then we had our staff meetings and then we had our equity meetings and we had our operations meetings and we had our acquisitions meetings. And so basically, we were intimately involved. The whole team is intimately involved, even though we weren't co-located or in an office. So even from day one, I felt like very much an integral part of the team. And so I got to learn all aspects of the business. Basically, I participated in the acquisitions phase. I participated in the fundraising. I participated in the debt raising, in the underwriting, in the due diligence, in the operations and asset management. So I really did give me an opportunity to kind of learn each piece of the business. And what I've learned about multifamily over the years is that it really is a team sport. Unlike single family, where I didn't do everything myself, but in theory I could have. I could have
Sure.
found the deals and I could have hired the contractors and managed the contractors and dealt with the staging and dealt with the listing and selling and all that stuff. In multifamily, you can't do that. There's too much to do. There
Yep.
are too many areas that are too important and too big. Doing acquisitions is a full-time job. Doing fundraising
Yep.
is a full-time job. Doing asset management is more than a full-time job. And so really in multifamily, you have to have a really good team around you and you have to be really knowledgeable about what you're good at and what you're not good at. And you have to be honest with yourself
Yep.
about what you're good at and not good at. And so that first year was actually a really good opportunity for me to figure out, one, what am I good at? What am I not good at? What do I enjoy doing? What do I not enjoy doing? So that I could figure out how, if I was going to become part of Ashley's team, how I could best insert myself into her team, or if I were going to start my own
Yep.
company, how I could best kind of carve out a role in my own company and then bring in other people to supplement me. And so what I
Yep.
realized was, and one of the reasons why Ashley and I are now full-time partners, what I realized was we had a lot of very complementary skills. She was really good on the acquisition side. She was really good on the asset management side. She was really good at everything that was day-to-day property related. I, on the other hand, I was really good at the accounting. I was really good at the HR. I was really good at the underwriting and the math and the processes and the systems. And I was really good because I had a large network and following. I was really good at the fundraising and equity side of things. So once we realized that we had these complementary set of skills, the next natural step was, hey, maybe there's an opportunity for us to work together. And so we kind of looked at what parts of the business would I be good at running, what parts of the business would she be good at running. And what we realized that was that between the two of us, we basically covered the entire spectrum of the business. And that's what kind of took us to that next level as partners. Now, the first deal, I'm sorry, I kind of got off topic there, but you asked about the first deal.
No, no.
The first deal was about 9 months after I.
All of that to me has to do with how the first deal plugs in
Yep.
anyway. I mean, the backstory, and then because I would want to point out too for the listeners, especially when you start talking about the difference between single family and multifamily, a lot of people, um, you know, where you could do 100 single families a year, multifamilies you might do two or
Yep.
three, because you're right. There's a lot of pockets and a lot of corners that need to be scraped out so that you can see what you're doing there, rather than in single family. Basically, you're like an inspection, a pest
Yep.
inspection, and financing away from
Yep.
closing. Multifamily, your sewer pipes and
Yep.
electrical and roofs and HVAC. I mean, so yeah. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah.
first
So
deal.
for the first deal, it was a few months into kind of working with Ashley and her team and being mentored, and we found a deal in Houston, Texas. And at the time, it wasn't really clear to me like what I was good at and what I should be doing. So I kind of participate in each piece of the deal. So on the acquisition side, I was kind of involved in kind of deciding on the areas and our buy box for that area. I helped out with the underwriting. I helped out with the due diligence once we got it under contract. I helped out with the debt piece and working with our mortgage broker and figuring out the right debt product for us. I raised some money, so I helped out with the equity side of things. On that deal, I don't remember if I acted as a key principal or KP or not, but we certainly talked about that. And so I really had the opportunity to kind of get my fingers into each piece of the business. And it was like as soon as we closed on that deal, it was pretty obvious to me what I liked doing, what I was good at doing, and what just wasn't in my wheelhouse. And so for the next deal, we
Sure.
basically decided, okay, I'm going to help manage the underwriting side of things. I'm going to help. I'm going to do all of the fundraising and manage the investor relations. That I would manage the capital stack, the equity, and the debt, and leave kind of everything else to the rest of the team. And so, really, that first experience where I kind of did a little bit of everything, it really helped me figure out what I wanted to be doing, what I was good at doing on future deals. And after that deal, I plugged myself in on one piece of the business or a couple pieces of the business. And then for the last 4 years, I've just been focused on those pieces of the business.
Awesome. Now, so I want to go back and talk a little bit about the team building part of that. So first off, I guess the biggest problem I think a lot of people have with the team building part is they're not really aware or knowledgeable about what pieces they're going to actually need help with, right? Like defining, hey, these are the things, like you said, these are the things that I'm good at. Now, what do I need to hire out, and what things can one person do all of, or what things does it take one person to do just that? Does
Yeah,
that make
absolutely.
sense? So I'd like to know a little bit, or like to hear a little bit about how you transitioned, or how you kind of started bringing that team on, and how you defined what you needed help specifically with, and then where you
Yeah.
found them.
I'm going to answer that second question first, where I found them, because this is, I think, a
Okay.
big sticking point for a lot of new real estate investors, and certainly a lot of new investors who are doing big stuff that need a team around them. A lot of us get into the business and we assume one of two things. We either need to do it all ourselves, which again, can't do that in large
Mm-hmm.
multifamily, or two, you need to hire a bunch of staff. And for a lot of us, that's just daunting. I mean, I in the
Yep.
corporate world, I manage literally hundreds of people, but the interviewing and hiring and onboarding was always really difficult to do. Even though I had a large company and hundreds of people around me to help, the idea of having to hire 10 or 20 or 30 people, not only from a financial standpoint did it seem crazy, but just from a logistics standpoint, doing that seemed crazy. And a lot of people assume that those are basically the two options. You either do everything yourself or you hire a whole bunch of people. And so what we realized was, or what I realized was, that there are actually other ways of doing things. So certainly there are pieces you can do yourself, and there are pieces where you're going to want to hire full time. But then there are other ways to do things. One, you can hire part-time employees. So you can hire somebody to come in and work for a few hours a week. So early on, I knew I needed a personal assistant or an executive assistant. Didn't really know what I wanted them to do, but I was doing a lot of busy work. So bringing in a part-time executive assistant made sense for me. And it was easy to hire a part-time person because I didn't have anybody quitting their job for me. I didn't have to find full-time work for them. If they worked 5 hours a week, great. So
Sure.
part-time was one way to do it. Another way to do it is partners. So there are plenty of people out there who do things that they're really good at, but they don't have their own company, or they don't want to be doing it for themselves, or they only don't want to be doing it for one person. So they can come in and they can help. So for example, we have a mortgage broker that we've worked with on a number of deals. And he's not only a mortgage broker, he knows the equity side of things. He does deals himself. So he's a great consultant. Every deal that he comes in, we give him GP equity. We give him equity in the partnership because he's just a great consultant, and he's also really good on the debt side. So he reads all of our loan docs. He takes care of finding the right loan products for us and working through all the debt stuff. So we don't pay him a salary. We don't have to onboard him. We don't have to deal with payroll and all that stuff. But we still have
Yep. And he's got a
and he's got a
stake. And he's got a stake. So it's all beneficial for
exactly.
everybody.
So partners is another way to go. Another way to go is commission. So we wanted to scale into new markets. And so we knew to do that, we needed acquisitions people, because the acquisitions part of large multifamily can be a really time consuming piece. I mean, reaching out to brokers and making phone calls and having lunch and sending emails. I mean, literally it can be a full-time job for several months before you start getting deal flow. And so because we didn't want to hire people, 5 different people for 5 different markets, we didn't want to spend the payroll and take all the time of hiring somebody. We found people in those markets that were already finding deals, and we said, look, bring us a deal, and in return, we'll give you $100,000 if you bring us a good deal, or we'll give you GP equity for bringing us a good deal. Basically work on commission. And so between the doing
Yeah.
everything yourself and hiring full-time people, there's part-time, there's commission people, there's partners, and there's lots of other ways that you can bring in a team where you're not spending a ton of time onboarding, you're not spending necessarily a ton of time doing payroll, and you're not necessarily using all of your resources to manage those people. And so basically to this day, our team consists of, we do have a bunch of employees. We have 7 or 8 employees. But in addition, we have a number of partners that we work with on deals. We have a number of part-time people. And then we have a number of commission-based people that especially on the acquisition side of things, that do that for us. And so that's how we kind of structure our team in a way that each piece of the puzzle, we have the right person in the job without, again, having to do it all ourselves or hire. So now going back to your first question, which was, what are those pieces of the puzzle? The big pieces for us, number one is acquisitions. So you have to get that deal flow. We like to have a dedicated person in every market that we're in, because what we found is for single family, for small multifamily, there's not much of an allegiance for brokers to buyers. So if I'm going to buy a single family house, a real estate agent or a broker, they don't care if I've ever bought from them before, if I've ever bought before, because they don't lose much if the deal falls through. But in large
That's right.
multifamily, the most important piece to any broker who is selling a deal is getting it to close. Because if I'm a seller
Yep.
and I hire a broker to sell my $50 million property, and they find me as a buyer, let's say, and I come in and I say, yeah, I can buy this $50 million property. Well, as soon as we go under contract, I'm going to have to walk the property, which means I'm going to have to see every unit in that property, which means every tenant's going to have to be out of their unit for an hour or two or three. Number two, I'm going to want to do a lease audit. So I'm going to be sitting in the leasing office probably for a week with my folks, going through literally every lease, asking questions about every tenant. And so it's a lot of hassle for a seller to sell a property. If that deal then falls through and the seller has to start that process over, well, most likely I'm going to fire that broker
Yep.
for bringing a buyer that couldn't close. So brokers are very
Yep.
protective about ensuring that a deal is going to close. And the best way they do that is they like to work with buyers who they've worked with before, who've proven that they can close.
Correct.
And so anytime you're doing acquisitions in a new market, you can spend months or years building relationships with these brokers to prove to them that you're serious, that you can really close the deal. And if you can't build that relationship, if you don't take the time to build that relationship, you're never going to get any deal flow in that market. So having dedicated
That's
people
right.
on the acquisition side to every market is really important. Number two, once you get that deal, you need a team of people who can then vet the deal. And that involves doing due diligence, going to the property, walking the deal, finding contractors that can put together a scope of work, finding a property management company that can do lease audits, basically going through the underwriting to make sure that you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's. Basically, your underwriting and your due diligence team. Part of that is going to be being able to work with your contracts attorney. Part of that's going to be working with a securities attorney to basically structure the deal if you're doing a syndication and you're raising equity. And so that could be one big team, or that can be multiple teams. We have an underwriting team and an analyst team and a due diligence team. When we started out, it was kind of one group of people doing everything, but now we've kind of broken down the tasks because we have more deal flow and we're doing bigger deals. Then you have the whole fundraising side of things. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the go ahead on into that, because there's more questions on that side, I guess, than there is anything. Now, everything you've provided so far is spot on, and you can tell that it's coming from experience. So I can only assume that the fundraising side is probably going to be equally as interesting as what you've gone through this far.
yeah.
So definitely, yes, just move right on into the
And let me
fundraising
start
side.
with, it's not just fundraising. I like to think of it as the capital stacks. It's both the debt and the equity. And too many people
Yep.
think about like the fundraising side and raising money, but they're not thinking about the debt side. And what they don't realize is if 70% or 75% of the money that you're bringing in is debt, is a loan from a bank or a loan from a government agency, that every quarter point in interest or every $100,000 you're spending on a rate cap can have a significant impact on the deal. And so too many people don't think about the debt side of things. They'll stick some numbers into their underwriting. I think I can get it 75% LTV, and I think I can get this interest rate. And
Yeah.
then they go and they actually spend weeks talking to lenders and figuring out what their debt products are, and they realize they were off by a quarter point here or $50,000 there, and the project's blown. So number one, when we talk about
Yep.
raising money, we have to think about the debt as well as the equity.
Well, I always say that the banks or even the government agencies or whoever the gatekeeper is of those, they're the biggest investor in your
Absolutely.
deal, right? I mean, it's again, like you said, everybody focuses on the private equity part and bringing the equity to the table, but then it's like all of a sudden everybody's like, oh well, we'll
Yep.
just go get the debt. Well, no, that guy's got to be sold, or that lady's got to be sold more than just about anybody.
Yeah,
So
we
go
literally
ahead.
have somebody on the team, and again, he's a partner of ours, that his sole job is to know whenever we're doing a deal what the current debt terms look like, and then going out and finding that right lender for us. So that's really important. But then we get into the
Okay.
fundraising side of the fundraising side of things. And a lot of people think that, like, okay, now that we have the deal, we can start raising money. And what they don't realize is, especially if you're raising, I mean, the deals we're doing, we're raising anywhere from 10 to $30 million. This isn't something we can like say, okay, let's start today and we'll have $30 million tomorrow. If we're going to raise 10 or
Yep.
$20 million, we probably needed to start a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 5 years ago.
Yep.
So the best fundraisers, the teams that do best at raising money, are the ones that have spent the last several years building a brand and building name recognition and building trust and getting their name out there, and really building a network of potential investors that once you have a deal, you can go to them and say, okay, all this time we've been building a relationship between us. Now I actually have a deal for you to look at. And let me tell you something. You think you might have $20 million out there, but the reality is, if whatever you think you can raise on that very first deal, you're probably going to raise 10% of it. If you're lucky, maybe 20% of it. After you've like done things for a long time and you've built up a great reputation and you have a brand and you have investors, you still might only be at 50 or 75%. There are always those investors that will tell you that they're going to invest. Maybe they even think they're going to invest, but for one reason or another, they're not. So I like to tell people, no matter how optimistic you are about raising money, you've probably started too late and you're probably too optimistic. So for anybody out there that's
Yep.
looking to get into syndication and looking to raise money, even if you think you're a year or two from doing a deal, focus on the building your brand, building trust, building relationships, and basically getting those investors ready to invest today, because that process can take months or even years. Um, yeah,
Well, and let's talk about that real quick about the fact, because I think there is some, I don't know what the best way to say it. Like there's some misconceptions about, I know when I first started several years ago, or well, a few years ago, and you're like, okay, do you go through a soft commitments? Because it's like either you get soft commitments or you get hard commitments. But as soon as you get and when I'm saying hard commitment, I mean somebody sign the documents, send the money's there, ready to go. The problem is obviously you're paying a pref, which is typically higher than your bank rate on that money as soon as it lands, versus the soft commitment where they're saying, hey, yeah, I'll commit X amount of dollars to it. And then there's also the in between there, where how do you keep a soft commitment moving forward? Because obviously a soft commitment, you call and you're like, hey man, I need to borrow $10 to go buy this thing. And I say, all right, cool, Jay, here you go, man. I mean, no problem, man. Just let me know when you're ready and I'll send you the $10, right? And then you call me in like 2 weeks. And you're like, hey man, I'm ready for that $10. I'm like, damn, Jay, shoot, dude, I just went and bought
yeah,
my kid a new yo-yo. I don't have that anymore. It's that same scenario, upside on a bigger scale. But the question is I think that's where a lot of confusion comes into the game, because people are like, well, hey, I don't want to just get a soft commitment. I want to take the money. But then, so at what point and how do you keep that river flowing up until they actually hit send
yeah.
on that wire?
So, and my partner Ashley and I, we vehemently disagree on how to do this. So it just goes to show that like people that are experienced are going to have very different opinions on how you do things. There's no
Oh,
right or wrong.
it's no, and it's about a
Yep.
50-50 divide. I mean, I think the fact that you two both have separate opinions about it, I think is the bulk of people that are in this business. I think half the people are like, hey, you take Joe Fairless for example. He's a
Yep.
wire it now kind of guy. He's a wire it now. I'll start paying pref the first day of the next month. Well, if you send it on the 10th, obviously he's got 20 days to place the capital. If you sit it on the 29th, I think he's taking a little risk there, and the capital could cost him a little bit. But nevertheless,
Yeah, 100%.
go
It's
ahead.
funny. I've had this conversation with Joe. He invests in my deals. I invest in his deals. We've had this discussion because we're both very different on how we approach this as well. So, like in our company, so Ashley's a big proponent of soft commits, figure out how much money is out there, get people like invested in the deal, and then when we're ready to literally raise the money, we'll raise the money, and they'll send the check or they'll wire the money. I'm more of I don't want to spin people up too many times if the deal's not going to go through. I don't want to spin people up.
That's that's it
So
right there.
exactly.
That's it.
And so
Due diligence falls apart, and you call them, hey man, remember that 50 grand? Now you can go buy your kid a yo-yo. We're out.
but here's the thing, it happens in hard commits also. We had a deal that we were doing, that we had a closing date, and we had like I think it was 12 of the 20 million committed just a couple weeks ago, and the deal fell apart. And now I have like 45 investors that I have to say thank you, but no thank you. And we're dealing with it. Our investors understand. In fact, if you're smart, you spin it the right way. You're like, look, we're not doing this deal because we found things during due diligence that added risk to the deal. We're not going to take extra risk. And our investors actually really like that. But you certainly don't want to be doing that like every month when you think you have a deal coming and you don't really have a deal coming. So there are actually ways that are kind of in between. And so again, Ashley and I disagree on the whole soft commit thing, but what we do agree on is you do need to communicate with your investors. You do need to keep them engaged, because one thing I found is we do a lot fewer deals than a lot of other syndicators. So we do between 0 and 6 deals a year. And so last year we did 0 deals. This year we've already done 3, but we invest a lot of our own money in our deals. And so we're not going to do a deal unless we really, really like it, and which means we could go 6 or 12 months without doing a deal on occasion. But if your investors don't hear from you for 6 months, they're going to invest elsewhere. They're going to forget about you, and then you have to re-spin up that relationship. So what I found is, instead of the soft commit, what we like to do is we like to just constantly communicate. So I do a monthly newsletter to all of my investors. We do a weekly newsletter to all of our investors, which is basically, I'll write an article every week. If I do a podcast, I'll probably put this podcast in one of our weekly newsletters. On a monthly basis, we do a monthly newsletter that has bigger announcements from the company, where we'll talk about each of our projects and how it's doing for our existing investors. And then once a month, I will do a survey of our investors on how much capital they have to invest and when, and what types of returns they're looking for. So once a month, I'll have this 3 or 4 or 5 question survey. Literally takes 15 seconds for them to just click boxes, but they can tell us we have X number of dollars to invest in the next.
Do you have somebody that does the survey? I want to dig back
so
into
this
that.
is something
you do that.
It's probably not something I should be doing myself. But when it comes to my investors, I am so protective when it comes to communicating my investors. So I don't necessarily write all of our communications, but I read every word of the communications that go to our investors, because I want to know what they're being told. I want to make sure things are being said in the right way. I'm very controlling that way when it comes to investors, because that is the heart of our business. And when it comes to these surveys, I'm very particular about the way things are written and what questions we're asking. And if they're going to have to take 25 seconds versus 15, that's too long. They're not going to engage.
Well, and see, and that's for somebody that's been in the business, like, let's say, a year, and you've built up a little base of investors. The reason I dig in on that survey part is because Hunter Thompson, for example, I'm in his mastermind, and what he always pushes, and it's like almost to the man, are you really talking about this again? Is surveying your audience. And I think that as for the person that's between a wholeheartedly all in, just blood down marketer, and the person that's a business capital raiser, studying LLC agreements, blah blah blah, in between there, somebody has to figure out, okay, how do we survey our audience and figure out what are they finding that they like, that we can do more of? What are they finding that, man, this really sucks? What of those things are there? So that's why I jump in on that survey part, just because it's such a big part of the relations.
We know
business.
At any given time, based on the last survey we did, do we have 10 million waiting to be deployed or 30 million waiting to be deployed? And again, you have to slash that, because people say they have money and then they don't. But if this month I have 10 million and next month I have 30 million, even though I don't know if I have 10 or 30, I do know that I have a lot more now than I did last month. And so that tells me I can probably be going after larger deals, or maybe we find somebody else to partner with. At the same time, I can ask basically, what are you looking for right now? Are you looking for cash flow, or are you looking for total return? And so that gives me some idea of the types of deals my investors are looking for. I know my investors pretty well, but we have a wide variety of investors. One of our partners used to be a professional athlete, and so we have a number of professional athletes that are investors. I used to be in the tech world in Silicon Valley, so we have a number of like young tech guys and gals that are investors who they know nothing about real estate. They have high risk tolerances. But then I also have a bunch of real estate investors in my network that invest with us, and they're a whole lot different. They understand the deals. They know exactly what they want. They can tell me to the dollar or to the percent what return they need to get a deal done. I know what their risk tolerance is. And so by doing these surveys, I kind of get an idea of, should I be doing these high risk deals that are generating no cash flow, but lots of total returns in the back end? Or are my investors right now looking for cash flow and security and low risk? And so because that's going to change over time,
Yeah.
especially as the economy changes, I can modulate the types of deals I'm looking for and the deals I'm putting out there based on what my investors are telling me. So the surveys are great. The other thing that I love about surveys is my wife and I wrote a book on negotiating as well for real estate investors. And from a negotiating standpoint, anytime you get somebody to physically write down, yes, I'm looking to invest $100,000 with your company in the next 90 days, they've now made, if not a hard commitment in their mind, they've made at least a soft commitment in their mind of investing with you. You force them to really think through the fact that they're going to invest with you. They've told you, and now they have this, again, not a hard obligation, but they have this kind of soft obligation in their mind that when you come to them and say, hey, we've got a deal.
Well,
Yeah, exactly. And so we really like this idea of the surveys, and we really like the idea of ongoing communication. I used to be a big believer that you can over communicate. That if I send weekly emails to my investors, or if we have a deal and I send every day, I say, hey, just a reminder about this deal, or every other day, I used to think like that's going to piss off my investors and they're going to like unsubscribe from my list. And what I found is that it's kind of just the opposite. If I go too long between sending messages, I get a lot of unsubscribes because those investors are either no longer interested, they don't remember who I am, they don't remember what we do. But if I send more constant communication, what I see is a whole lot more engagement. Certainly, there are some people that don't like to be bothered every day, but those are people that weren't going to invest with us anyway. So I've now kind of gone on this other track of over communicating because I found that it works.
Hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the Cash Flow Pro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making Cash Flow Pro part of your day. Now, back to the show.
And and I think that everybody thinks there's a fine line there, and the fine line actually exists not in how often you communicate, but what you're communicating about. And when you're communicating about, when you're trying to offer somebody a chance to make money, man, you could tell them every hour, and especially after they've invested. After they've invested, man, something changes. They want to know, because the thing is that these people that are investing 50, 100, 200, 250, a million, whatever in your deal, they've obviously done something to make that money initially, right? And we all know what that making of that money boils down to is control. They've controlled something to an extent long enough to make this pile of money, right? So when they invest it with you, they want to feel like, hey, I have some say so here. I have some so the control part of it, I think, is
and here's the other thing. We use our communication to educate as well. And so a lot of our investors also want to do syndication themselves. They're looking for a place to put their money, but they also want to be active. And so we use a lot of our communications to educate, not just on the deals we're doing, but we'll talk about, like, we'll dig into the underwriting of the deal. We'll dig into the opportunities on the deal, things that typical investor might not be interested in, but somebody who's actually looking to become an active on the syndication side themselves, they're going to be like, oh, this is really good information. And if I send 10 emails in a week and 3 of them are educational and 7 of them are pitching a deal, those investors, those people are going to keep opening the deals, even if they don't care about the deals, or opening the emails, even if they don't care about the deals, because they know that a few of them are going to contain good information, good education. And so they're looking for those. And then one day they may be ready to invest in a deal and they're still opening the emails.
And the thing is, the education and all of that and the information is coming from the survey. It's the survey, information, education, survey, information, education. Now, one thing that I've found interesting, we're kind of running close, we're running short on time, but it's been a very interesting discussion, because I feel like you're right in the glut of where a lot of our listeners want to be at some point, but you're still early enough in the actual syndication part to be able to freshly tell us, hey, these are the things that we did to get traction, right? But one thing that I found interesting in some of the surveys, and I've actually talked to several investors that were in past deals, other deals. Matter of fact, one doctor was in a deal with a guy in New Jersey, right? And so I just remember this. This is the example I'm going to use, but the deal lost money, and he was in it. It was several years ago. And the funny thing about it, when I started talking to him and asking inquisitive questions, was he wasn't even mad about losing the money. I mean, he didn't lose it all, but he wasn't even mad about the investment losing money. You know what pissed him off?
Yeah.
They didn't tell him. They didn't tell him until it was over. And he was like, what do you mean we lost 20% of my money? And instead of he was like, I went into a real estate deal. I knew there was a chance, right? It was a little bit this, that, or the other, but the fact of the matter is everything went on and went on and went on and went on and went on. And then when it came time to cash out, everybody were like, oh, hey, sorry. And that's what pissed him off. That's what made him mad. And it was just like, man, that could have, not that he probably would have likely came back on another deal, but at the same time, there's a better chance that he would have, right?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I'm big on, one of our core pillars in our company is transparency. We are always going to be completely transparent with our investors, and our investors know it. And there are times when my partner cringes a little bit because I'll say things that she's like, oh, I can't believe you said that to an investor. But it's like, I would rather tell an investor the potentially bad thing that could happen now, so that if it does happen, I can say, we talked about this, and let's talk about what we're going to do to mitigate it and fix it. I will often jump on Zoom calls with potential investors for a deal, and I'll say, let me tell you about the 3 things on this deal that keep me up at night. And I'm investing my own money on the passive side, so I know how you're feeling. So let me tell you those 3 things, and let me tell you, if each of these 3 things or any of these 3 things happen, let me tell you what we're planning to do about it. So that way, if one of those things happens on the deal, I can go back to my investors and say, hey, you remember we talked about this? It sucks, but it happened. And just like we talked about, this is what we're doing about it. And our investors love the fact that when they talk to me, I'm not all, this deal's fantastic and nothing can go wrong and you're going to make lots of money. I'm pretty cynical, and I'm going to tell them.
Hey, and that's, and that's the way that you have to be. And because at the end of the day, hey, listen, hey, this may go good, this may go bad. Listen, we hope it goes good, but if it goes bad, this is the list of things that may happen or going to happen or whatever. Now, real quick before we move into the last phase of this, but I want to know where is your stream of investors or potential investors or even people to have calls with?
So I've been fortunate enough over the last 15 years that I've built a pretty good brand. A lot of your listeners are probably familiar with Bigger Pockets, so I got in with Bigger Pockets really early. I've written 4 books, soon to be 5 books for them. I was the host of one of the Bigger Pockets podcasts up until last year. And so a lot of people that are part of the Bigger Pockets community know me through that. And so I'm pretty active on social media. I post a lot on Facebook. I write a lot of articles. I'm pretty well known for just the education that I put out there. And I've basically spent the last 15 years kind of building a brand and putting information out there without asking for anything in return. And so I get a lot of people who say to me, I've been following you for 10 years and now you finally like have something I can invest in. I really want to invest with you, even though I've never invested in anything before, because I feel like I know you. And so what I would tell anybody out there that's looking to build a brand and build up an investor list, start by offering value, giving value without asking for anything in return. Build those relationships, build that trust. So that way, a year or 2 or 5 down the road, when you are ready to start raising money, people are like, wow, you've been giving to me for the last 3 years. You've never asked for anything in return. I'm thrilled to invest with you because like, I feel like I know you.
Yeah. Awesome, man. That's great. And I think that there's a lot that carries a lot of value to the people who are trying to figure out how to dig in. So awesome. All right. Well, listen, Jay, so we always end each episode with a couple of questions. There's no right or wrong answer, but the first of those questions is, what is the best book that you've recently read?
So my favorite book, and I like to pick this one because my guess is nobody else on your show has suggested this book, but it's a book called The Goal, GOAL. And it's all about basically process improvement and creating optimal systems and processes in your business. Books like 40 years old, written by a process engineer, but it applies to real estate investors. It applies to business owners, whoever you are. And it's just for anybody out there that's looking to build and scale a business, I highly recommend that book.
Awesome. What is a dream vacation that you have either taken or hope to take?
So we've been trying to do Alaska for the last couple of years. We were supposed to go just before COVID, and then COVID hit, and then we're supposed to go last year, and then COVID got in the way again. And so we've been trying to schedule this Alaska trip with our 2 boys. We have 11 and 12-year-old boys for a couple of years now. So hopefully this winter we'll be able to do that one.
Awesome. All right. Well, listen, so how can the listeners reach out and get in touch with you? If there's something they heard, which I know there is questions they may have or things they want to know more about.
Yeah. If anybody wants to find out how to connect with me or anything that I'm doing, just go to one place, www.connectwithjscott.com, just the letter J, connectwithjscott.com, and that'll link you out to everywhere.
Awesome, man. That's great. Well, thank you so much, Jay. I know you're a busy man. You all have got, it's obvious with the phone rings and the dings and everything that you got going on. Man, but hey, listen, that's part of the business we're in. And, when those investors call and people reach out, we may hit the decline button one time, but dang good and well, you're going to call them back when we get off here. So thank you so much for your time. And listeners, as always, please head down and leave us a review. Leave us a 5-star review, and we will most certainly appreciate that. And also, while you're there, hit the subscribe button so that you can be notified when we release new episodes, new content. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. And again, Jay, thank you for your time. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day.
Cashflow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.